How is everybody? Good? Yes? Can you hear me? No? You can't hear me? Do we have audio? Yes, there we go. Yes, you're looking very nice today. Much better than last week's group. They were horrible. Actually, last year's group were horrible, but you guys are much nicer. Oh, sorry, some of you were here last year, sorry. Okay, hopefully there's enough seats for everyone. A very good morning to you. How is everybody? Good? Enjoying NIC? Yes? Ready for a couple of days of good learning? Okay. Just a couple of little notices. He just asked me, do I want some water? And I said, no, I've got my own. No, I actually really do have my own. If you go to the glass paper booth, if you want to know more about my trainings, I've got a CISSP security boot camp coming up. And I've also got an Office 365 boot camp, which goes way beyond Microsoft stuff, which goes way beyond this session, and it's all hands-on and so on. So we're running that at glass paper. So if you want to know more about that, there is a barcode on the bottle. It will tell you more details. Very good morning. Welcome along to my first session here at NIC for 2015. This is Cloud Wars, migrating to Office 365 with no casualties. Can I just have a quick show of hands? Who is considering Office 365? Who's thinking about moving to Office 365 and moving to the cloud, Windows, Azure? Well, I've got to tell you, basically, in a few years, I don't think you'll have a choice. In a few years, I think we're all small, medium-sized businesses. We're all going to kind of move to the cloud. And as the cloud story evolves, it's a natural progression, I believe. I mean, already now, we're talking about Windows 365. And that's kind of a very thin computer. You know, you've seen things like Windows to Go. Imagine Windows to Go, but on a very thin platform. Anyway, that's a story for another time. Who am I? If you haven't met me before, my name is Andy Malone. I'm from the UK. When I'm there, I'm not there very often. I tend to travel a lot with my job. I'm an MVP in security. However, that may change this year. I've been kind of, Andy, do you fancy coming to the Office 365 team? So I am kind of doing more and more with 365 and also security. I've got 3 sessions here at NIC. So today, this one is all about migrating. Then I thought what I might do later on this afternoon is take a deep dive into the DirSync technology, or AAD Sync, or AAD Connect, whatever you want to call it. Tomorrow, I'm going to look at identity theft. So I'm going to kind of switch hats, come back to my security sessions, and I'm going to do one on identity theft tomorrow. So I'm an MVP for 8 years, hopefully 9. I'm a Microsoft trainer for 20 years. I'm also a consultant. And as I say, I speak at various worldwide conferences. So what is this session about? Well, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about all the different types of migration. So many of you are consultants, many of you are administrators, many of you may think about, okay, I need to move to Office 365. Moving to the cloud itself is actually really quite simple. You can just open an account. You know, somebody asked me what I was doing last week, and I said, I'm teaching Office 365. Office? That's a bit easy, isn't it? Really? Okay, so there is a lot of technical stuff here. So getting users onto Office 365 is easy. Migrating users into Office can be potentially tricky. So what this session aims to do is really look at all the different kind of options that we have for moving to Office 365. So I'm going to talk about PST migration. You know, oh my God, those 2 terabyte files, terrifyingly big files. How do we move them into 365? We'll talk about IMAP. So IMAP migration. We'll talk about something called a cutover migration, staged migration. And again, I'm going to mention hybrid. I've got a little bit on hybrid deployment as well. So essentially, really, your customers are really going to have some kind of email. So whether it's a web-based email system, whether you're using Google, whether you're using, God forbid, Lotus Notes, whether you're using Microsoft Exchange, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. You're going to need to move across. These are the current solutions. Now, hybrid is a kind of slightly different story, but hopefully this session will enlighten you into all of these different technologies. So first of all, I guess we need some kind of deployment plan, don't we? So ultimately, when you sign up to Office 365, you'll sign up with a company name, mycompany.onmicrosoft.com. And all that is just a container in Windows Azure. That's all it is. In Windows Azure Active Directory, it's just a container. It doesn't mean anything. You can have any name that you like. It's not like a domain name. So one of the first things you want to do is you're going to want to register your domain name. We call this a managed domain. So mycompany.com, bobsboats.com. You will obviously register bobsboats.com, and then you need to add it to your Office 365 domain. So that's a requirement. So add the SMTP domain. Now, of course, Microsoft have a deal with GoDaddy, but you can use your own if you want to. And then essentially you need to prepare your current email server. So when you prepare that email server, you want to get rid of all the crap. If you've got Active Directory, absolutely fine. But get rid of all the old junk, any old stale accounts, any old mailboxes, things that you don't need. Top tip, by the way, any email with attachments larger than 35 meg will not migrate. Okay, so any kind of attachments more than 35 meg, you need to do something about that. And then, of course, you actually go through the migration, and then eventually you're going to decommission that old mailbox there. So that's the kind of the plan. So before we actually initiate the plan, we need to think about, okay, what system is the customer currently on? Are they using webmail? Are they using Notes? Are they using Novell GroupWise? Are they using Exchange? Okay, so once you've determined that, then how big is the company? Are they big, small, medium? Do they have some kind of directory, Active Directory on premises? Now, if they're a small mom and pop company and they've decided, hey, look, I don't need any of this stuff, I just want to get rid of it, that's perfect. Okay, you just bring them straight across into Office 365, kick that box over, throw a tablecloth over it, and use it as a coffee table. Great. That's the easiest way. But what if the customer's already made a significant investment? They've got Active Directory, they've got Exchange, and they maybe want to keep it in one way or another. So again, you have a number of different choices to make. So, does the customer want to keep single sign-on? Do they want to have Active Directory on premises? So all of these questions need to go into your kind of deployment plan. So when we talk about the first of our options, which is PST, personal stores, which even if you've got, web-based mail and the customer's using Outlook with a personal store, which many, many people do, it's a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? Because personal stores are on individuals' machines. And originally, they used to be 2 gigabytes in size, but now they're 2 terabytes in size. They're huge. So we need to do something about that, all right? Because that just obviously won't come across. So there's a whole bunch of issues that we have with PST files. So there is, oh, by the way, what I was going to do, I like to give love from my sessions. So all my content, I'm going to share a OneDrive later. And I'm going to put some white papers. I'll put all the tools that I'm talking about today. I'll put slides, videos, demos, everything, okay? I'll publish this on Twitter later, at Andy Malone, okay? That's my Twitter handle, at Andy Malone. All right. So this is a great little tool. This is the PST migration tool, free tool. This is a tool that Microsoft produced, and essentially it's a little agent that you can deploy on your network, and it detects PST files, and you can then migrate them and move them as you will. So this is a really nice, easy tool, and because this is based on an Outlook tool, you can actually bring across not just mail, but things like users' contacts, calendars, and notes and tasks and things like that. Okay, so this is the actual tool. It's called PST Capture. Very, very simple tool. Essentially 3 components. So when you first install the tool, it essentially installs a console. So there's like this little front-end console. There's an agent, a tiny few K of a little agent that you just deploy. Now, you can obviously deploy that through SCCM or group policy or even Windows Intune. So if you're you've got a large customer base, you're a consultant with many customers and you want to manage them, this is a great way to do that. And then when you install the console, it also installs an agent at the same time. And the agent basically calls out to the agent that's installed on the various machines. So when we talk about the actual process of a PST migration, obviously here, what you need to do is you first, as an administrator, you need to go into Office 365 and you need to actually create those user accounts. You need to create those mailboxes, because then essentially you're connecting to this and you're pulling that mail across. One thing that you possibly or probably will need to look at, just give it a minute while the screen adjusts itself, is I'm just going to go into Office 365 here. I'm just going to go into my admin console. So when you create a user account, I'm just going to go into my active users here. And let's just say I'll go into, who will I use? I'll use Chandler Bing. I'm a big Friends fan, what can I say? Okay, so I'm going to go into Chandler Bing, and I'm going to go into More, and I'm going to go into his Exchange mailbox settings here. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do, obviously if you're bringing a personal store across, you don't want to dump that into the user's mailbox. That could be a bit of a nightmare. So what you want to do is over here in Mailbox Features, if you just scroll down here, now the reason I'm getting that error message is just because Chandler hasn't logged on, by the way. So if I just scroll down here, one of my options here is you want to create an archive for the user, okay? So an archive is essentially a centralized personal store. So it means that I can manage it. Now, depending on the SKU of Office 365 that you have, this can be anything, well, it says unlimited, but it's got a 100 gig kind of limit on the E3 and E4 plans. If you've got the smaller business plans, this can be up to 50 gig storage. But again, if you don't have a plan that has that facility, you can basically just add it onto your plan just for a few kronas a month. So that's it there. You need to switch on archiving. So if you're going to use PST files, archiving is really the way that we want to go here. So I'm just going to flip back to my presentation. And the screen will just blank out for a second. Time for a quick drink. Oh, I timed that well, didn't I? There we go. Okay, so so essentially what we want to do here is you want to provision those mailboxes, those users first. Then once you do that, you then go through the PST migration. Once you've done the migration, you can then, I can then decommission that old mailbox. You can get rid of it if you want to. This is the actual setup process. So you just install PST Capture. It installs itself as a service, as you can see. You can choose a port number here. That can be just a high port number. It just picks one at random. And once it's installed, you then get the console. So with the console, there are a few things that you need to configure. So first up, it needs to know, obviously, your Office 365 credentials, and again, the port number that it's using. It then says, okay, do you want me just to dump the mail in the user's main mailbox, or is there an archive folder created? Now, bearing in mind that one of the problems with PST files, it is kind of a manual process. So there are a few things that you need to do initially. Okay, so once you've done that, basically it says, okay, what do you want to do with other things? So things like calendars, things like contacts. Do you want me to migrate this stuff as well? Or do you just want to basically do the mail? Okay, so basically, yep, I want to bring it in. So I'm going to bring it in here. This is kind of a timeout setting. So how often do you want me to poll my PST files? So again, you can set that 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you want. Again, it depends how many agents that you've deployed on the network. And this is essentially what you get. So after a few minutes, you'll get a list of all your servers here in green, all your machines. These are the user's machines. And this is a complete list of all the PST files that you've got. So you can then say, hey, I want to just migrate these ones across. And you can do that at your leisure. And that's PST migration. Now, that's the free tool. Now, you might probably say to me, Andy, surely there's got to be quicker and faster ways to do that, right? Of course. So if you're, if you want to go out and spend some money, there are some really slick tools to do that. And again, I'll show you some of those as we go. So the second of our migrations is what we call an IMAP migration. And with an IMAP migration, we're talking about basically anything other than Exchange. Anything. So whether it's group-wise, notes, webmail, Gmail, anything like that, you can bring it across. Now, when I said anything but Exchange, I also mean Exchange 5.5 and Exchange 2000, because that's legacy now. Can I tell you, by the way, I went to a military customer about 3 months ago to do a migration, and they had Exchange 5.5. And I, honestly, God, I walked in and went, my God, how does this work again? It was so long since I've seen Exchange 5.5, and it was Windows NT 4. Yeah? And honestly, it's still out there. It's crazy. So the answer is, this is kind of a catch-all service. It will bring everything up, okay? So with an IMAP migration, the great thing about this is it works with lots and lots of different solutions. If you guys need a seat, by the way, there's a few here if you want to jump in and grab a seat. No, you're okay, you sure? Okay, cool. You just want to stand and look good, right? Okay. So one of the nice things about this, though, is you can migrate your users in batches. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you saw I can just go into Office 365 and I can manually create a user, right? Nah, you wouldn't do that. What you could do is you could create a CSV file, yes? And there are templates in the Office 365 website, and literally you just list all your users, suck them all in, okay? And create those users and mailboxes prior to migration. So you must create the users and mailboxes first before you do any migration. You'll obviously need the user's current credentials, so whatever their credentials are, because you'll need to get in and you'll need to migrate that mail across. So it works with on-premises and also in the cloud as well. You do need access to those IMAP ports, okay? So obviously 993 or 143 there. So once you've done that, essentially, you can then go ahead and go through the migration. Now, do I need any kind of special tools for this migration, I hear you say? Do I need any special tools, Andy? And I'm glad you asked that question. So, no is the answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to here. I'm just going to go back to this user mailbox here. Oops. Not that one, just this one here. And I'm going to go back this time I'm going to go back into my admin, but I'm going to go to my Exchange Admin Center here. So all the tools that I'm talking about here, everything is portal-based. You don't need to install any specialized tools here. So what I'm talking about here is I'm simply going into Recipients, and here it says Migration. I click on Migration, and I then have the Migration Wizard. Now, one of the most important things about 365 is it's your data. Okay? When you put your data into a Microsoft data center, it's not Microsoft's. This is your data. So you can migrate in or you can migrate out at any time. And you can do that here. You can see that I want to migrate in or migrate out of Exchange Online. So if I want to migrate in, I basically have a number of options here. Do I want to do a remote mailbox move, which is hybrid? Do you want to do a staged migration, a cutover migration, or an IMAP migration? And I just basically click Next, 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 and I'm good to go. Okay? So it's basically a very, very simple process. Oslo by night. Okay, now, what is migrated? So with an IMAP migration, obviously if you've got webmail, Gmail, things like that, it's very much based on just mailboxes. So things like contacts, calendars, and so on, unfortunately, they don't come across. Okay, so we're just really talking about mail here. So what is migrated, you can choose here. What is not migrated is very much listed on the right-hand side. Remember, any attachments in or out larger than 35 meg do not come across. So this is the process. Provision those users in 365, create the mailboxes, go through that migration process, use the wizard, use the credentials. Once everything has come across, you'll then, if you're using web-based mail, you'll need to obviously change an MX record so that it points to Office 365. Okay? So once you've changed that MX record, just let it do a quick sync, and then you can disconnect, and you're pretty much good to go. So this is the migration tool. Now, like everything Microsoft, everything's based on top of PowerShell. So all the GUIs that you're seeing now in SharePoint, Exchange, Link, Skype, what is it? Skype Enterprise Server, Skype for Business. They keep changing the name on a weekly basis. So all of these tools are based on PowerShell. So if you like using the GUI, great. If you don't, there are PowerShell commands, and you can script the whole process. Incidentally, by the way, this is a great troubleshooter. This was launched about a couple of months ago. This is the IMAP troubleshooter, and it's a catch-all kind of question base. So when you go out to customer site as a consultant, you definitely want to look at this for requirements. It gives a great checklist. Okay. Incidentally, as I said, any tools that I mention, I'll give you a list of at the end. Okay, so our third type of migration is a cutover migration. And with a cutover migration, the customer has Exchange. Okay, so they've got anything from Exchange 2003, 7, 10, or 13 already in place. Okay, and the idea is that, we don't want it anymore. So we've got Exchange 2003, we've got 200 users, we want to move to Office 365, boom, and we don't want this anymore. Okay, perfect. So at the end of this migration process, you pull the plug, change the MX record, and everything essentially moves to Office 365. Okay, so benefits to this, it's really simple. So the idea is that you can run that wizard, click, 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 and essentially, if you've got everything in place correctly, everything should work nicely. Good thing about these types of migration, because you're using Exchange, you don't need to pre-create any user accounts, you don't need to create any mailboxes, everything comes across for you. All right? So when you run the wizard, it provisions user accounts, provisions mailboxes, and it will bring it all across. So what kind of numbers are we talking about? It can handle up to 2,000 users at the moment. Now, there are plans for up to 15,000 users. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hang on a minute, Andy, you just said that that was a small business thing. Well, have any of you heard of Windows Server Essentials? Any of you seen that product? Okay, so the idea of Windows Server Essentials was that it replaced Small Business Server that had Exchange and SharePoint, and it now hosts them in the cloud. And this is so important now because in Windows Server 2012 R2, you now have an Essentials component for enterprise and data centers, which means essentially you could have a massive data center environment, but at the same time, you can host your cloud solution, your SharePoint, your Exchange for thousands of users in the cloud with that solution. Okay? Fantastic technology. And that is going to be a big part of the Windows 10 timeframe as well. So the plan is to have up to 15,000 users. It's not there yet. Hopefully by the end of this year it will be. At the moment it's 2,000 users. You must have a public SSL certificate in place, and you also need to create an admin account. So I need to basically have access to the user's mailboxes, either receive as or full access permissions to those mailboxes. And the idea is it brings everything across. So not just the mail, but it will bring contacts, calendar information, attachments, everything across. Yeah, so I've said that. Okay, now what is migrated? So everything comes across. The only thing it doesn't bring, by the way, are things that send on behalf of permissions. So you need to kind of redo that again, all right? But it does pretty much bring everything else across. Okay, now where it says partial migrations are not possible, what I mean is you can't say, let's have the mail between February 2012 and 2015. You can't do that. It's an all or nothing type of install. One thing about cutover migration, you will need to distribute passwords. So if you've got DirSync on your environment or any kind of password synchronization, this will need to be disabled. If you are using DirSync or password sync, don't worry, there's another solution for you. All right? Okay, so step by step, are you familiar with the Exchange Remote Connectivity Analyzer? That's quite an old tool now, but actually these tools are in the portal now. So if you go into Office 365, if I just go in here, and if I go into my Office 365, and down here on the left-hand side, you can see that we have our tools area here. Now, in the tools, these are all our remote connectivity analyzers for Exchange and also for Link. So if you're planning any kind of migration, you want to take a look at some of these tools here. Okay. Okay, so up next, I thought you might like a quick walkthrough. So, of course, this has to be a video, unfortunately, because if it's not, you'll be here for 3 days, and I assume you don't want to be here for 3 days. So one of the things I need to do is obviously just check that I've got a registered domain. So mydomain.com, bobsboats.com, you need to add that in, and you need to verify that domain name. Now, once you've verified that domain name, you can set the purpose of that domain, and what it does, it will show you your DNS records that you need to put in. So once you put in your DNS records, things like MX records and so on, then you're pretty much good to go. So all looks good to me here. So by clicking, say, I want to use Exchange, I want to use SharePoint, it will then show you your DNS records that you need to put in. And this is all the DNS records here. So once you've sorted out your DNS records, you then need to think about, okay, the actual administration of the on-premises Exchange server. In this demo, by the way, it's an Exchange 2003 box. Okay. They're already in. That's why I'm getting an error there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm now going to flip over to my Active Directory. And in AD, I'm going to create an admin account that has access to those mailboxes. Now, you can call this pretty much anything that you want. I'm just going to call it Migration Admin or MIG Admin or something like that. Now, you can tell the old timers here, because we always click those two buttons. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is using PowerShell. All I'm doing here is I'm saying get-mailbox, pipe add-mailbox permission, user migration admin, and I'm saying access rights, full access to all the mailboxes. Okay, so that's all that PowerShell command is saying. So enter that. At this point, I need to now stop and restart the service, the information store service. And there we go. So once you've done that, so I now have that user account. I'm now going to my Exchange Admin Center. And I'm going to start a new migration. And I'm going to migrate in to Exchange Online. And you can see I'm going to choose a cutover migration. By the way, if that's grayed out, the reason is it's because you've got DirSync enabled. And that's an exam question, by the way. Okay, so now I need to just put in an email address of any person that's on that Exchange server, so any user that's on the Exchange server. And I'm going to put in an account with privileges, so this is my MIG admin account that I've just created. And I put the name of the Exchange server, and of course your RPC proxy server. So mail.mycompany.com, whatever you've called it. Alrighty, now you need to give the job a name. So new migration batch. I wonder what the PowerShell command for that is, by the way. Yep, give it a name. And then it says, okay, do you want to schedule this to run at a particular time? So maybe at a weekend or in the evening? Or do you just want to go ahead and you want to start this now? So I'm just going to say, yep, I'm happy with it. I just want to go ahead and run that now. Are you sure? Yes, I am. So now that batch is starting to run, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to create user accounts in Office 365, and it's also going to create mailboxes. Then one at a time, it will then start populating the mailboxes with the mail. Remember, any items over the 35 megs or any issues with mailboxes like naming issues, again, these mailboxes will be skipped. So you can see now, this might be an hour or so later. Those mailboxes have synced, so we've got user accounts and mailboxes in place. you can go into any of these accounts now, and it shows you how many items have been copied across, how many items have been skipped, and again, there's a great little report here that you can go in and look at. Now remember, all this is free. So although there are fancy tools out there, you can get away with just this. Okay, nice thing about the reports is it shows you the absolute step-by-step, what the wizard is doing, and if there are any issues with any particular items, it will flag those up. And now it's just a case of just waiting for that wizard to go through. Now, this could take days, of course, depending on the size of the mailboxes and so on. Okay. And that, it just carries on there. Oh, okay. There we go. So, once you've done that migration, the one thing that you will definitely need to do is you will need to license those mailboxes. Yes? Also, a potential exam questions. Okay? So, the next migration then is a staged migration. So, a staged migration is similar to what we've just looked at, but what if the company is very big? What if it's complex? What if you've got thousands of users? Well, what we're talking about here is you're going to need to have a solution that will remain up for an amount of time. So, for example, a school with thousands of kids or thousands of students, or a hospital or something like that. So with a staged migration, we use DIRSync, the directory synchronization tool. Okay, so again, very similar. We're talking 2003, 7, 10, and so on. You must purchase a publicly accessible SSL certificate. And again, you need to create a migration account, exactly the same process as what we've just looked at. One thing, though, you don't need to do with this, though, is you don't need to distribute passwords because you're already using Active Directory. That's the benefit of this here. Okay. So again, similar to a cutover migration, it brings everything across, user accounts, mailboxes, contacts, everything. Okay, everything will be migrated across. For account provisioning, don't worry, it does everything for you, so you don't need to pre-create anything. And again, the target mailboxes, users will just remain using their on-premises credentials. Now, this didn't used to be the case, by the way, because if you wanted single sign-on in the past, you needed Active Directory Federation services. Now, of course, all you need to do is click, there's a little checkbox that says Allow Password Hash Synchronization, and I'll talk about that in my next session. Again, you can, if you don't use DIRSync, you can use a batch process, so similar to this, a CSV format. So you can import all your users just the same. One user per line. And you can have, again, a maximum of 2,000 users per CSV file. Incidentally, there's a great little PowerShell command that just checks everything, just makes sure that it works right, and that's the smart dash check command. So what is migrated? Again, all the mail messages are brought over. Calendar items, contacts, tasks, notes, everything comes across. Even things like out-of-office messages. Not migrated are things like security group dynamic distribution lists. Unfortunately, with Exchange 2013, which essentially is what you're moving to, you need to recreate those. Send as permissions, again, you'll need to recreate those. Partial migrations, that's between the date, time period, again, are not possible. And again, unified messaging. So if you're bringing like link mailboxes and things over, there is a separate set of tools for that, by the way. The admin will need to distribute new passwords unless you're using DIRSync and password sync, which of course you will be here. But again, the one down thing, or the one downside about staged migration and cutover migration, is when users log in, they will need to create a new OST file. Okay? That's one of the big selling points of hybrid solutions. So when you move to a hybrid, you don't need to create that file. Users just carry on using Outlook like nothing's changed. So again, step by step, just check the remote connectivity analyzer with Exchange. Assign migration permissions to an account. The same, configure the directory sync tool, which I'll show you in the next session. Once you've done that, enter the server settings, do the initial sync. Very similar process to the wizard that you just saw, in fact. Okay? At the end of the day, of course, however, the one difference here is that that Exchange server can stay up for a while, because this might take a considerable amount of time. So you might want to bring across all the team from Bergen, all the team from Oslo, all the team from your London office. You might want to migrate them like that, which is perfectly fine. I saw a great example here. We were doing a class a few months ago here in Oslo, and an example of a staged migration was a school where they decided that they want to put all the kids into the cloud, but they want to keep all the teachers on-prem. And the question was, Andy, can I just let it run continuously? Absolutely. Absolutely. The only difference with that is that the users in the cloud in that solution are deemed as external users, whereas the users on premises are internal. That's the only difference, and you need a connector between them. But can they run with long-term coexistence? Of course. Absolutely. No problem. Okay, so what about, Andy, do you recommend any kind of third-party tool recommendations to make your life easier? Absolutely. So I mentioned the PST migration tool. This is a great tool. This is a paid-for solution, and this is like that tool, but on steroids. It automates the whole process wonderfully. It's really good. It's called PST Enterprise. My absolute favorite migration tool, because it's written by another MVP friend of mine, this is called Migration Wiz. Again, fantastically simple. It's not the cheapest. And I will actually say, I'll add one other here as well. You've heard of Quest, right? Quest. I would say that the Quest tool is probably the Rolls-Royce of tools, but unfortunately with the Rolls-Royce comes a Rolls-Royce price tag. And knowing the prices of stuff in Norway here, I shudder to think how much they would charge for that here. But there we go. So Quest, the migration tool from Quest, but this Migration Wiz is really good. The last one is that this is a British company that do this one. This is called Cloud Migrator. It's not as pretty as the other tool, but again, it's pretty good as well. All right? So Andy, what about hybrid? You keep talking about this hybrid solution. What does that mean? Well, in this scenario, you're a consultant, you've gone to the customer, and they've made a significant investment already. They've got Exchange, they may have SharePoint, they've got Active Directory, and they're not really in any hurry to get rid of it, especially if it's like Exchange 2010. So can I coexist with Office 365 and Windows Azure? Absolutely. Absolutely you can. And there are a number of benefits for that as well. So in this scenario, we're actually seeing the best of both worlds. Now the key difference here, the key benefit, is that Exchange on-premises sees Exchange in the cloud as just another server on the network. Okay? So it means you can just move mailboxes back and forth as if that other server was on the network. Okay? It also means that when your users, I can log into my email and shut it down, go in the next morning, log back in again, and nothing's changed, but their mailbox has moved. Okay? So again, really, really friendly. There's no OST files to rename or anything like that. So again, in terms of feature comparisons, you can see with a simple migration, with a cutover migration, with a staged migration, you have what we call simple coexistence. And simple coexistence for those kids in the cloud and those teachers on-prem was a global address list. So I can just see the address list of all my users. But that was it. I really couldn't see things like, I couldn't share calendars. I couldn't do some really cool stuff. This is where hybrid definitely has the edge. Okay? The one thing that you need to put in place, though, is you need to either put in an Exchange 2010 box or an Exchange 2013 box as the client access server role. So it essentially hosts the Outlook web access thing. And the good thing is this is free, by the way, which you don't get a lot from Microsoft these days, but that's free. But look at the benefits that you get with going hybrid. So the obvious downside, though, is the cost. So the cost is you've got to maintain this, but at the same time, you've got to have licenses for this as well. But if you're looking for a good halfway house solution, then it's pretty good. Any questions so far? Do we have any questions? Andy, can I buy you a beer? Absolutely, no problem. Who's migrated, by the way, to Office 365? Anybody actually gone through a migration? Okay, how was the experience? What kind of migration did you go through? Oh, use Quest. Ah, there you go. How did you find it? Yeah, it's awesome. It is an awesome tool. Anybody use any of the manual tools, not actually a third-party tool? Yeah, yes? What did you use? Sorry? Just these tools? Okay, but it was just how many users? Okay, no problems? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so why deploy a hybrid exchange then? So the key thing about hybrid, making that decision to go to hybrid, is really a long-term investment. So, for example, you wouldn't deploy DirSync just to create a bunch of users. So you wouldn't deploy a hybrid server just to move a bunch of mailboxes. That's not what it's designed to do. So by deploying a hybrid solution, you're making a long-term commitment to have both up and running. It's really designed for very large migrations. Now, Andy, does that mean that if I've got a small customer here and he's got 50 users, does that mean he can't use it? Absolutely not. Of course you can. You can use that solution if you want to. But the only problem is the smaller you are as a business, you've got to question the cost. Yes, where it might be more cost effective if you're a larger customer. But there's absolutely nothing to stop you doing it. Transparent mailbox moves. So as far as the user's concerned, the user remains static. It's the mailbox that moves. So the user continues to use Outlook. It's just the signpost that's really changing. And that's what makes this solution really interesting. Okay, so just having a quick look at the various building blocks here. Obviously, federation. A common question I get is, Andy, do I need Active Directory federation services here? Absolutely not. Of course you don't. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't use it. And if you go to one of John Craddock's sessions, he does a great session on ADFS. One of the main reasons to use ADFS, I would say, in this next generation of products is for apps. So if you've got a particular app that needs to be federated or single sign-on, that's when I would use ADFS. Prerequisites, of course, directory synchronization. The server is absolutely free. You definitely need that certificate in place. And as I said, ADFS is optional. So rather than run through these slides, I don't want it to make it death by PowerPoint. I've got a little demo that's just coming up. Okay, this is a really interesting slide, especially if you plan to do the exams. So there's some, what ports and what versions of Exchange do you need? So if you've got Exchange 2003, 2007, you can do a hybrid with Exchange 2010. If you've got Exchange 2007 and above, you can use 2010 or 2013, whichever you prefer. Okay, remember permissions, interaction with third-party applications, that you'll need to obviously test those, and do make sure that you have appropriate bandwidth for moving those very large mailboxes. So, the days of yore, this is the way that we used to do a hybrid migration. It was an extremely 50-step, really difficult process. So when we ran this class, delegates would get terribly frustrated, whereas now it's a really, really simple solution. So I'm just going to log on here to my Exchange Admin Center. Remember that Exchange Online and Office 365 are the same thing. Again, I'm going to the same place. I'm going to go to my migration. Now, assuming that, of course, you've got all the prerequisites in place here, you'll notice here, this is the Exchange 2013 product. So at the bottom, I've got two additional items. One that says servers, and one that says hybrid. So again, I'm going into hybrid, and I want to set this up. Okay, so it detects my Exchange certificate, and you can see it's offering me a text file, a text entry if I was using ADFS. I'm not using ADFS, so I don't need to do that. Okay, so I need to put in the receiving client access server. So this is my on-premises client access server that I've deployed for free. And my sending mailbox server. In this case, they're the same. Okay, then it says, do you want to set up Exchange Hybrid? Choose your certificate and give the job a name. So just give it a name. And obviously put in the path to your fully qualified domain name. And then my internal credentials, my on-prem credentials. And my Office 365 credentials. So what it's doing here, first of all, it's connecting to the tenant, and it's now creating an organizational relationship. So this is a little bit like DirSync and how it connects to Active Directory. So this is the equivalent of that. So once it's done that, it will then configure any recipient policies that you've set up. Unlike the staged solution, by the way, it sees Office 365 mailboxes as internal. That's the difference here. So everything is just internal. And that's it. You're done. Okay? And that is so much easier, by the way, than the previous solution. This is a question I'm often asked, by the way. And also, again, if any of you plan on doing the exams, what are the limits of Exchange Online? So what are the recipient limits? What are the numbers? 35 meg, you can have 125 attachments, and so on. I just put that slide in there. I thought that might be useful for you. Okay, that's good knowledge. Okay, any final questions? Listen to that. Sounds of silence. Simon and Garfunkel. Okay. What I'm going to do is I've got loads of videos, loads of reading materials. I've got slides, extra documentation. I'm going to post them on my Twitter page. So we looked at PST migration. We did IMAP, cutover, staged, and we had a quick word about hybrid. Remember, if you want to get my extras, you can sign up to my OneDrive. That's Andy Malone, at Andy Malone on Twitter, and I will post that later today or tomorrow sometime. Did I mention, by the way, I've written a book. I've just written a new science fiction thriller. It's called The Seventh Day. It's Highlander meets the Da Vinci Code. Okay, it's actually doing quite well. There is a bookmark down here. And also, I've put some bookmarks on the glass paper booth. If you come to my session tomorrow with a bookmark, I'm going to ask you this question. And when I ask it, the first person to come forward with a bookmark will win a book. Okay? So the question is, what's the name of the main character in the book? Okay? What's the name of the main character in the book? That's easy, right? Okay, I'm going to show you a quick trailer. Here's the book trailer. If Mark Rasinovich can get away with it, so can I. Come on, right? So let's pump up the volume. Here we go.
Brother.
Alrighty, so thanks very much. Hopefully you learned a little something. I've got a DurSync session today and also security tomorrow. Remember, pick up a bookmark. What's the name of the main character? See you tomorrow. Thank you.